Hi, good morning everybody. Thanks for coming in so bright and early to make some time to hear what I have to say. I hope it interests you for the next sort of half an hour or so. I'll kind of talk for around 25, 30 minutes, something like that, and then that should give us some time for some questions. And it's quite noisy in here, but they will pass a microphone around when the time comes. So if you've got any questions, do hang on to them, and I'll do my best to answer them when the time comes. So I've been invited here to talk about how Downing Street has moved into a digital age. Now, I like to think that we've been living in a digital age for quite some time now, but I think we're ever changing, we're ever growing, I think, into that space. So I want to give you a few examples which I hope are useful to you, either to know about the kinds of things we're doing if you're unaware of them, to answer any questions you may have, and maybe there are a few things that you can take away from our approach which might be useful for your approaches in your companies and wherever you may work. So thanks for coming along today. As we heard, my name's Anthony Simon. I'm head of digital comms, so I look after digital communications for Number 10 and Cabinet Office. That means we oversee quite a lot of digital content for government, obviously highlighting the priorities of the Prime Minister. We also look after the Deputy Prime Minister and other ministers from Cabinet Office, which is sort of, best way of thinking of it is government head office. We look after a lot of things which government centrally coordinates on behalf of our departments all over Whitehall. So I hope some of the stuff is interesting that I can tell you today. I wanted to start off by telling you one of the major challenges we've had over the last year or so is moving all our content from each different department, whether it be Number 10, Cabinet Office, DEFRA, Department for Culture, Media and Sport, Ministry of Defence. Every single government department has now moved on to a single domain. And we think that's a very important leap forward in that it doesn't assume a huge amount of knowledge by our users. In the past, if you wanted to, for example, if you wanted to find out something about higher education, about universities, you might think you'd need to go to the Department for Education. Well, actually, it's the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills that you need to go to. So, but prior to having a single government website, it assumed some prior knowledge on the behalf of our users that that's the bit of government you need to go to, and it can make it incredibly complicated. Now the great thing is you can go into gov.uk, type in higher education, and it would just bring you automatically to the right place. So Gov.uk has made a big difference to the way we hope users can find our content. I don't know if you've tried to use it yourself, but we also realise that equally we try and be less arrogant in thinking that people are going to purely come to the gov.uk homepage. We realise now that most people's starting point is actually on Google. It probably seems very obvious to most of you here, but actually for government, when we're dealing with a big organisation such as government, there is a certain arrogance, feeling, kind of a thought that everyone would be able to come to yourself, but that's not the way it works at all. So we think we've made some big strides. So as you'll see from the slide there, we used to have a Number 10 website and a Cabinet Office website, which I was responsible for. They've now both gone on to gov.uk. So do have a look on that when you get the chance, and that will explain more about the way it works. Here's the next one. One of the main things I have to do with is around social media. I'm at great advantage, and obviously I'm from the Prime Minister's office. There's a huge amount of interest in any Prime Minister of the UK. And so we use those social media channels to engage as deeply as we can. Again, we're fortunate, have huge numbers of followers on some of our social media accounts. 2.5 million for Number 10 Gov alone allows us to do some pretty powerful stuff, which is very good news for us. We have 700,000 followers of the David Cameron blog on LinkedIn. He's been signed up as an influencer, which means that he blogs on LinkedIn, and we find that a really good way of reaching high-quality people from the UK, around Europe, and around the world. So that's a really powerful tool we have at our hands, and the levels of engagement of that are very strong indeed. And we have about 200,000 followers of Number 10 on Facebook as well. So between that and the website, I usually say we have we can usually engage with about 4 million people a week, something like that. Now I know that's very much finger in the air sort of stuff. Yeah, it's about that, and it's completely unscientific. Because yes, I know that not everyone reads every comment and every update and so on. But that's a very useful tool when I'm talking to marketers, to press officers, etc., and comms professionals, when I can say, well, actually, if we're reaching that number, that's higher than pretty much the circulation of any newspaper in the UK. So it really is a good sort of stat to get out there. And that's something that I'd encourage you to look at, is just be able to look at your own stats and sort of, it can be useful to make comparisons with other means of communication, because of course there are some people who aren't as far through this digital journey as we all are, of course. We get big kind of different types. I'll go into a bit more detail in a while, but we get different types of communication via different channels, and I'll get on to in a minute about using the right channel to do the right job. The number 10 Gov Twitter account is enormous. I can't pretend that we are an active community. We have so many people on that channel that we simply don't have the means or the resource to be able to reply to people from that. There are plenty of other places around government where they are able to do that. But we hope that we give interesting content. It's breaking news content. We can put things up on Twitter which will appear in Sky News within sometimes a matter of minutes. So it's very powerful in that way. And then Facebook is a much more emotional, we find a much more emotional engagement. I think just the way you like something on Facebook in itself is an emotional thing. And I've talked about LinkedIn as well, about it being a very high quality platform, in that actually we're able to engage with business people, usually from a kind of small, medium-sized enterprise background. So a really powerful way that we're able to reach out directly to them and get quite high quality comments back. But again, I'll give you more examples of that as I go through. Something I'm quite proud of. Per capita of population, number 10's actually got the highest number of followers in the world from any government account, which is brilliant for us. White House obviously has more, but because it has a much higher population, it comes down lower in the chart. So we're number 1, and then the government of Chile, interestingly, is second. We're finding quite a lot of, some of the best countries we're finding at doing this stuff are actually not the ones you'd expect, not the very big countries. Often they are countries such as Estonia, some of the Latin American countries like Chile, who I think, because they're small and they don't have the huge amounts of funding, they've actually turned that to their advantage. And they're able to do things sometimes out of necessity, has been the reason why that they've had to go for a very digital approach. And we try and get ourselves into that mindset as well, thinking, what can we learn from these people that they've done so well? So a lot of stuff is, our default now is no longer, should we just throw lots of money at this thing? It's how can we think smartly? What sort of things can we be doing in the digital space to reach people, using the brilliant advantages of the channels we've got? So therefore we use the number 10 Twitter for doing things such as retweeting other messages from around government when they have a big strategic importance, retweeting and favoriting comments from other organisations. So we try and be very strategic with our communication. Yes, we have day-to-day tactical things we need to do, but also we like to be able to take a step back and thinking, what are we doing here? Are we tweeting too much? Are we doing it in the right style, etc., etc. So that's another thing we spend a lot of time looking at. Big question I'm dealing with, I don't know if any of you from a sort of press office background here, PR background, but a lot of what I've been doing is trying to get civil servants from my comms colleagues from across government to think, why is this the press notice? Why is the press release still the common means of communication? Why should that be the main way we communicate with people? I mean, if you think about it, a press release even predates TV, because it's about press. It's something you would have sent out. Originally, you'd have typed it out, sent it out via telegram, later by telex, later by fax. Now people send them out via email. Essentially, it's the same process. It's just been modernized a bit over the years. I'm trying to get people to do a fundamental rethink of the way that we communicate with people. And actually, I hope we practice what we preach in the Prime Minister's office, in that we're not afraid of using social media for major announcements. And indeed, it helps drive the agenda for traditional media. And one example here is around the last couple of reshuffles we've had. We've actually announced them. This is when the Prime Minister changes the ministers he has working in his cabinet. We've actually we've tweeted that rather than going the old-fashioned way of sending out press notices and so on. It's incredibly democratic, meaning everyone's able to get it at the time. There aren't a few favoured journalists who will find out more. Everyone gets to find out at exactly the same time. It's engaging in that anyone who's got an interest in politics, in government, is able to look into it instantly and find what it is. and it's very fast. We're able to do it, within seconds. Sometimes, as someone being appointed, we're able to get that message out. So we've actually from doing things in a very old-fashioned way, we try and leapfrog wherever we can to go into a very modern way and putting it all out there on social media. And the point I said before about it driving the agenda for traditional media, well, the top right picture there is showing we tweeted a photo of the new cabinet meeting. Again, instantly that was on Sky News, BBC News of the first picture. So, Twitter is very powerful. It's your breaking news feed. In where I work, in major organisations, it's your breaking news feed. It's probably very obvious to most of you here, but my job is actually trying to demonstrate to people that actually it's the right way of doing things. You'll hear a lot of people, probably in the civil service and many other organisations, oh, what about the risks? Isn't that awful? What happens if we tweet the wrong thing at the wrong time and it goes out? Yes, there are risks around it, but I just flip that on its head to people and say, what are the risks if we're not doing it? What are the risks of not doing this stuff? If we're there in 10 years' time saying we're still sending out press releases to people, where will we be then? So there's a lot of, there's a lot of thinking we're trying to do in this space, and I think it's, on one level it might seem fairly trivial, say, oh, we'll just do announcements on Twitter, but I think there's a more profound change that's going on, and something deeper that I'm trying to push through the organisation. So that's kind of the way I'm thinking about communicating, the way I'm trying to encourage people to think more digitally, and importantly, not just around digital specialists. We've got great digital specialist teams around government, but actually, we want everyone to be digital. So a lot of my work is around trying to encourage people to think along this way. As long as we have specialist digital teams who kind of are exclusively digital and they just do the digital work, I think we'll never get that culture change we need to happen. We need everyone to be thinking in that way. And I think when you get some people who are in that traditional mindset and they suddenly get it, that's incredibly powerful, because all of a sudden we'll find that people are doing things in a slightly different way. We're finding slightly different outcomes. And then in turn we find, hang on, you've actually got a whole organisation on side here. So that's kind of, we find that a very, a very powerful argument to make. And it does take time. We're doing a lot of culture change pieces, which I can answer your questions on those after this. But yeah, it's something that we're spending a lot of time doing at the moment. So from kind of press release stuff, what else do we do? Well, we still look after campaigns. There aren't as many campaigns from government, as you may have noticed, than there were, say, 5-10 years ago. We're far more careful with what we do with our money. But again, that's a good thing for digital, because we're finding a lot of big kind of outdoor campaigns, poster campaigns, PR campaigns, etc., are coming more to our door. So one other thing we look at quite closely is campaigns. And I don't know if you've heard of the Great Campaign. That's a campaign which is running around the world and also in the UK now. It's taken together lots of pre-existing things. Might be around UK trade and investment. It might be around coming education in Britain, visit Britain, all that kind of stuff. So we've been able to bring that all together under the Great Britain brand. And that was something that was around in the year of the Olympics in 2012, and something that's grown, and something that will be there for some time to come as really the predominant brand to kind of, it's the glue that gels together all the marketing and comms activity we might do in those spaces. So to give you some examples of things we've been doing, this is the Love Great Britain website, which was previously Visit Britain. It's a collaboration between ourselves at Number 10 and Visit Britain. We talked together on what could we be doing to kind of, bring it into that space. We had the advantage that, they've got 1.9 million followers for Visit Britain on Facebook, which is fantastic. We were able to work together on that, which allowed us to get some, even higher number of followers. The content might remain exactly the same, but as long as the branding is similar, that can help with that recognition. Because in the same way as I was talking about Gov UK at the beginning, in the marketing space, again, there were all kinds of different marketing brands that were out there, often for good reason. But we tried to get into the mind of the user, into the minds of people around the world about what sorts of things would they be looking to from government comms and government marketing. And in fact, now it's in the top 10 of UK Facebook brand pages. So that's good news for us. Next one is Knowledge is Great Britain. which is another one. We're able to show off about Britain being a great place to come and study, come and work, come and visit, come and study, etc. So again, that was one, and we put that under the Great Britain branding. Another great collaboration between ourselves, this time with the British Council. And this time we saw a 50% increase in fans over 4 weeks. So, we've just shown having the power of a strong brand behind it, actually, without us doing a huge amount of extra work, work in terms of what you'd see on the page, just getting your branding lined up actually had a great impact, which is fantastic for us. Now, I talked earlier about using the right channel for the job. I know it's been coming up to 2 years now since the Olympics, but I still think it's one of the best examples we've got of using digital to good effect during that fortnight. And in fact, still 9 out of the 10 of the PM's top Facebook posts were about the Olympics, and we gained about 3,000 followers on Number 10 Gov across those 3 days. So we had some really good impact, and I want to show a couple of slides we've had from it, from the pictures. First one there on the left-hand side is that's just, as you can probably tell, taken on a very low res. I think it was an old-fashioned BlackBerry, hence the resolution. The resolution is pretty bad. But there's the Prime Minister kind of watching the boxing, cheering on Team GB. That got a huge amount of support. Interestingly, when we put it on Twitter, it got quite a lot of ridicule. People thinking, why is the Prime Minister dressing up in a T-shirt, watching TV? Has that been set up, etc., etc.? When we put it on Facebook, we got nearly 1,000 comments. We got 2,800 likes. Most of the comments were very positive. So again, it's showing what I was saying before around how you get a different kind of reaction on different platforms. So I would really say it's about getting to know your community on different platforms. What our case might be unique, I don't know. Everyone's case is very different. So that's why when we're talking about Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., and all the others, Instagram, Pinterest, etc., we always think about what our audience is on there. What will be the reaction of people? Doesn't mean to say we don't avoid controversy, but sometimes we might talk in slightly different ways about things. And then just a very easy mugshot of the Prime Minister and his wife at the Olympic Stadium at the Paralympic opening ceremony. That became the most liked post of the whole Olympics and Paralympics. So it just shows sometimes something very simple out there, done at the right time, can be very powerful. And timing, I'd say, is everything. Twitter, you've got to be very fast, we find. You've got to be, sometimes you're talking minutes, seconds. Facebook, you can probably be a bit more considered. And then LinkedIn, we can be, there's probably less of a time pressure there. So, we try and suit our audiences. That's probably because Twitter, we've got people using it like a news feed, so they want to find things out very quickly. And then we've had the most retweeted one. I think it's still of all time that we've done. Over 1,500 retweets of just President Obama congratulating the UK on the Olympics. And that was helped because the White House themselves retweeted it. And retweets from influential people, again, might seem a kind of obvious thing, but if there's any activity you're doing and you can get retweets from influential people, something we've found is it can have an amazing impact, both from their endorsement and from the pure reach that they have. So we've been able to get endorsement from people on various things, and often, I'm working in the political world. Quite often we can do things on, for example, we did a dementia campaign, and we managed to get Stephen Fry to retweet it and endorse it. He's not usually the most enthusiastic fan of this government, but we're still able to do that, for a particular cause which he thinks is important. So, think about what are if you're looking at your own, social responsibility, etc. Even though some of these people may not be terribly, natural fans of what you're doing, it's amazing if you find the right subject matter. You can find these people can become advocates quite quickly. We make a great, looking at graphics, we take great, a lot amount of attention onto the way we display our stats, any data that comes out. It could be, it's very easy, I know, just to tweet something with a number in it. That's fine. When you're in government, you're dealing with kind of crazy numbers. When you're talking billions, trillions, things like that, it can get very complicated for people to picture. So we've found a great uplift in the amount of engagement we get just by putting simple graphics. Some people might call them infographics. I think I wouldn't call these infographics. These are just graphical depictions of information. I think to call them infographics is kind of, when you get into graphics, infographics are into a different world altogether. Some of these things can be done quite simply, and actually some of them we've even just used photos and having people in the team who are quite good at Photoshop to put a bit of decent text on it. It's amazing what you can do, whether the text is putting a hashtag on. If these were things that were designed to be tweeted for the Department for Work and Pensions around the recent employment stats. So it's something we were able to tweet, get out there during the day, and we found really good engagement. And we're doing some work now, actually, of looking at the style we're using. Is the style right? Are they cutting through? I don't think these are perfect, by any stretch of the imagination, but I think they're a good step in proving that the way Twitter, Facebook, etc. works is that they're becoming increasingly visual. And we're finding a real convergence of channels in that way, in that visual is everything. Information is getting less, but the visual depiction is kind of becoming everything now. So it's not just getting stats out there for the sake of getting your stats out. It's about trying to make a far bigger point by using strong graphics, which are shareable, easily read on Twitter, and even simple things like the number of times I've seen tweets go out where you have the dimensions of a tweet, and yet people put the information kind of above and below with a bit that auto previews when you're looking through your Twitter or your Facebook account. Things like that. Think of the way people consume their social media, which I think will help people make really help people make as best graphics, best information as people possibly want. Gone back to campaigns for some reason. We look at in terms of campaigns, that last slide there was about showing how we do big campaigns. We also do small campaigns. And I think no longer when we're thinking of campaigns do we see the pound sign flashing up. We're thinking what sorts of things can we do ourselves that we can use in a campaigning format ourselves. We've done things around dementia campaign. We've done things here around traineeship programs where we've asked people's views. This is an example from last year where we got people. We did it on behalf of the Department for Education, I think it was, around traineeships. So government traditionally call that a consultation. But actually, if we're campaigning about those things, getting our consultations out to where people are, getting them to add their comments in easy ways, that can be a very powerful way of doing it. Government's always done consultations, but usually they're very hard to find. The people who we want to consult with don't even realise there's a consultation going on. You've got your big organisations who do it, but you don't have ordinary people, if you like. So if we're using our own channels and kind of reaching to that everyday audience, we find also is a powerful way of reaching them. And this is on the Prime Minister's blog, by the way, which we've got on LinkedIn. Where, as you see, we've got a range of messaging over various things, usually with some kind of business interest around them. Analytics and evaluation are very important to us. And I know you probably have a lot of people around here who will do a great job in talking to you about analytics and evaluation and can do things. But it's very easy from a government position to sort of think, actually, let's go into broadcast mode. Let's just push stuff out as much as we need to and don't think too much about the kind of stuff we're getting back. So we look very closely at the stats we've got. I mean, this is just an example. This doesn't really tell you anything per se, but this is just some examples of the analytics that we get from Twitter and Facebook. A lot of this stuff is available for free for those of you who have those accounts, and there are many organisations, of course, who will do it for lower or greater cost. I would say even if you're using a free tool, it's amazing how much value you can get from even looking at those stats, for 5 minutes, something like that. You can see very quickly the kind of stuff which is interesting people, the kind of stuff which isn't. Where are people getting fed up? Where are they leaving? And interestingly, we've found, often when we have the days of the biggest number of followers on our channels, it's also the day we lose a lot of people as well. So maybe that's just a result of doing high amounts of activity, that you're finding people and you're also losing some. But as long as you're gaining more than you're losing, then I guess it's a good thing. But we always try and take time to look back at what we've done and decide if we could do that piece of activity again, how will we do it differently? And I'm sure this is best practice for many of you, But I think in government, when you're always sort of rushing, there's always something going on, and then there's always something happening the next day. It's kind of always that machine to try and keep up. Sometimes it's hard to take a step back and say, well, hang on, what can we be doing differently? Are we wasting our time busting a gut to try and get this information out? Are we doing? And I'd add website stats to this as well. Sometimes it's the things we put huge amounts of effort into. You realise actually not many people, are looking at, and vice versa. So we learn a lot from those things. And I would say, don't become a slave to it. And we're not chasing fans for the sake of fans. But I think there are other levels, such as the level of engagement you're getting, the level of interest you're getting. Where are people dropping off? So we don't just chase fans for the sake of chasing fans. We do it in a way that we think is, interesting and engaging for people. I talked earlier about what we've been doing for civil servants capability. We carried out a thorough audit of all our channels from across government, and we've highlighted those areas that we need to be doing more work on. So we're actually doing quite a lot of work at the moment to look at all our different channels across our different departments and work out which ones are performing well, which ones are performing less well. And I talked earlier about kind of capability, which is really important for all communicators to have. So we're also looking very closely at the levels of capability we have within our comms teams, and try and get everyone up to a certain standard, and realise that the digital capability is a journey. We try and get people through that journey, trying to get them to improve their skills over that, and give them targets to set for the next year or so. As you may have noticed, there's been a lot of flooding around Britain the last few months, and it's something that I've been very heavily involved with, about how can we help communicate both with the country on it and with those affected by it, by these awful floods, the worst floods we've had for 250 years. Well, Sunday before last, we worked with our partners, colleagues across the tech community, worked with people such as Google, Microsoft, Facebook, colleagues in Tech City as well, and thought, how can we bring ourselves together and work out the sorts of things that we could be doing to improve comms, to improve comms around flooding, to improve people's lives who've been affected by flooding. So we had a hack, and we got together people from all those organisations to come up with what sort of thing could we do. And it was a fantastic effort, and given that we only put it together on Friday, and by Sunday we had over 100 developers turning up on Tech City, who worked all the way through the day until the late evening to come up with some really nice gadgets, gizmos, apps, whatever you want to call them, that can help people in the event of both that crisis and any future crises. To give you a couple of examples, Facebook responded within a couple of days and are able to put a message up on people's news feed asking if they've been affected by the floods, and they were able to geo-target that by people who were most likely to have been affected by the floods, which was very powerful. And the guys at Uswitch also came up with a postcode finder, because to find what happens, to find who you need to call if you have a power cut. Believe it or not, it's actually quite hard to find that information if you have a power cut, because it's not your regular power supplier, it's another organisation. They set something up where you could just type in your postcode and it would tell you who you need to call. So little things like that were very powerful. And we're also working on a bigger SMS system, so we're able to alert people and some to future flooding and other emergency events. So we like to be responsive. Sometimes there are times where you need to drop everything and make things happen. And we hope that in number 10 we're able to get into that space and work very much with our partners across the industry, because we realise that in government we don't have all the expertise. Great thing about digital world, it's incredibly collaborative. It's a collaborative world. Yes, we can be competitive with one another, but we can also collaborate together. So yeah, I think that's sort of some of the one of the more interesting things that we've been able to do recently. It's something that I think has made a real difference. And I think the great thing about digital is when we do it right, we can make a real difference. So thanks very much, and I'll take any questions. Right, there are microphones coming around, so do stick up your hand if you've a couple in the front here.
Hi, I was interested about the social media part of it. One problem we have in our company is when we want to tweet something or message something out, we have to go through various internal channels to get it approved.
Yeah.
How do you do that in Downing Street? How does that get approved so quickly?
I think, well, a couple of things. I think planning's important. If we know beforehand what the message is going to be, then I think they can help us prepare. So get things signed off, in good time. Yes, we still have the level of sign-off that needs to happen, of course, but we are able to move very, very fast, and we have, it's very, very easy for us to escalate to a high level if we need to. Also, it's, I think, about being able to trust people and have a process of knowing which things might be particularly controversial or problematic, and we need to have that high level of sign-off, and which stuff is routine. And even within government, we realise that 90% of stuff is probably fairly routine. So it's just about being able to work out where are the nuances of wording, where is it very important, and actually linking through to other things, other press releases, etc., can be very powerful as well.
Hi.
Hi.
I know you talked a bit about statistics and analytics and things.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what sort of insights you're actually able to take from that, and how you can assess the sentiment of your audience from that. I'm thinking kind of, for example, the Home Office had a bit of a blunder last year with its Go Home campaign, and the use of Twitter. I appreciate this isn't your department, but the use of Twitter for some of those communications was widely criticised.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering sort of how you take on board those kind of reactions and backlash, and how that informs your strategy.
I think sometimes there are, you need to look at, we're not scared. I think we can't be too risk averse to there being a so-called backlash against certain things. Yes, if there's a backlash about the execution of it that's bad, then I think we can look at it and work out, hang on, was that something we could have done better on another channel, or not done at all, etc. A lot of the skill, I think, is knowing when not to use digital comms as well. So I think you still have a digital approach and say, well, actually, for this, it's not something we would touch on social media. A lot of stuff that we do on social media, of course, doesn't involve. A lot of comms we do doesn't involve things, because you're actually trying to manage stories down rather than up. So we can use it powerfully for rebuttal and that sort of thing. But in terms of, it is very difficult when you're running a big organisation such as Number 10, when you're after so many things. For example, what are people's opinions on the economy? It's a very difficult thing to do. We look at sentiment over periods of time, and we have an analyst in the team. And I think actually there are times when I would say, if you're able to do it, an in-house analyst can be incredibly valuable. Yes, you can go to agencies and they'll give you all sorts of brilliant advice and so on, but having someone who can be with you over the long term and work out exactly where you're trying to achieve, and work out what kind of comments are just noise. It's people, as you know, go onto social media to all kinds of things, and often polarizes in a very different way than they might rationally do otherwise. And also, so it's knowing kind of, when looking at those long-term periods, and also knowing when is it important enough to make it an intervention, and also, being able to find trends. I'd say trends is more important than sentiment. Which are the things that are bubbling up? Interestingly, now it seems to be with social media, so much news now comes from social media. It used to be the other way around. It used to be news would happen, and then everyone would talk about it on social media. Now it's things happen on social media, and it works its way into the news agenda. So I hope that's an answer. I can't, I would say any kind of analysis is a good thing. Yes, it is very hard sometimes and it's a judgment call quite often. Often it won't tell you very clearly yes or no, you should be doing something. But I think it's about, if you understand your community or understand your channels, then I think it gives you a greater hunch, greater gut feeling about what is right and what needs to change.
Thank you. Hello, it's Anna Lawler from Social Media. You mentioned PR briefly there, and I just wondered how the government's use of social media and how that enables you to speak directly to the people is changing your relationship with traditional media.
That's a really good question, because I think it's, I talked about using it when we were tweeting the change in cabinet, change of ministers. You think that would be and in the past, I think that would be quite a difficult thing to work with the media, especially when you're dealing with the Westminster media, who are a kind of very close shop. They're very, they work in a kind of small community, and they let us know very quickly if they don't like something. they were very happy with that, I think, because they realised that actually it's something that had to go out to everybody. It was always going to go out to the wider world, and it was still the same for everybody. That's fine. I mean, interestingly, social media is about one of the few direct channels that Number 10 has to engage with the outside world. Normally it's done via third parties, via the media, etc. So I think there's an understanding. I think the media now understands that they benefit a huge amount from social media in terms of where they get their insight from, in terms of the way they in turn communicate. So they can't have it both ways. Then they've also got to realise that it's something that the organisations are using for their own benefit. So I think they're realising it's here to stay, whether they like it or not, and they no longer have the monopoly on it. But where I think the value they can add now is a huge amount. Well, for any PR/media, is still able to draw, still able to do to look more strategically at things, to talk about how campaigns can be run, to how particular announcements can be made, etc. And actually, I think it almost makes the job for PR more important, because there are going to be more opportunities to say, well, actually, these are the risks of doing things on Twitter, and you can virtually any day you can open a newspaper somewhere there's some Twitter disaster that's gone wrong, and able to point out those sorts of things about be careful of these banana skins that can be around.
Yeah, I'm Jakob, and I was just wondering, how do you use social media or do you use social media mainly to disseminate information, or do you use it, or how do you use it to interact directly in a two-way communication with users, for example?
Well, when you have very big channels, it gets very hard to do that kind of direct one-to-one. But there are ways we have to think around it. So we can use specific hashtags, for example, often in fairly niche areas. We can also use different channels. So we're actually, so much of us, what we do is it's not about using our channels. I say that, when I mentioned that we reach 3 million people a week, whatever it is, people say, well, that's great. And I say, yeah, it is great. But what about the other 63 million people in the UK that we're not reaching, via our own channels? So it's about getting our messages onto other spaces. So I think rather than trying to engage all the time via our own channels, it's often about trying to get our messages onto other places where they may be. So that can be around ministers doing interviews still on using social media for the mainstream media, regional media, specialist media, all that sort of thing can still be can be carried out effectively. So we are limited just by the sheer size of what we've got, of what we were able to do. But we think by using a kind of more traditional press operation in a digital way, applied to a digital way, can help us have those conversations. But having said that, there are lots of places around government where they do have that direct, relationship with people, but they're all around specific things. So if it's around business, if it's around the government digital service, Foreign Office, etc. So people want to know travel advice and are having questions about that. There is a big operation in place to address and answer those questions. So I think it's about doing it through the right channels. And there's a danger, I think, for Number 10, because it's big, for it suddenly to become a one-stop shop for everything we do in government. And I think that would be wrong if we were to do that, because that's not really what we're about, and it's about trying to get people to the right places to have that interaction. Over there.
Thanks. Hi. I think there's always been a challenge for government communicators to try and manage the distinction between communicating about the business of government and then the political aspects. And I was just wondering, so for instance, for Number 10, how would users kind of know the difference between a tweet from David Cameron and a tweet from the Prime Minister's office, or other ministers, and kind of how you might manage that distinction and that relationship going forward to the election next year? That's a really good question. We have our own. We have the Number 10 website. It's very much the Number 10 Twitter rather. It's very much the voice of the Prime Minister's office rather than it being the Prime Minister. So therefore, we don't put things in first person, but in third person. The PM has said such and such rather than I have said such and such. The Prime Minister's got his own David Cameron account, which is run by his party, and that's fine. And I think if you look on the Twitter handle biography, it makes it very clear which is a party political one and which is one that's run by government.
I mean, we're in the situation, where we are. That's the way politics works, and I think it's the same for, it's similar in the States where you've got a Barack Obama account and you've got a White House account. So same in many different places. But I do think, you mentioned the election, I think that it is going to become as people's number of followers, as their Twitter handles grow, I think any future administration will be looking at their own Twitter account, saying, well, can I bring my account with me into government? So there's a variety of things that approach. I mean, we, for example, at number 10, we don't retweet the David Cameron account, so it makes it clear that they're different. And I think, and interestingly, we've been looking on Twitter quite closely about any for signs of any confusion. It doesn't seem to happen, although I'm sure it does, happen in places. But it's a situation where we are, I think, with just the political situation that we're in, and again, that you could get a minister or the Prime Minister giving a speech, and bits of it will be very party political, bits of it will be very about the government. And you have, so there are, and actually we've got some ministers who will have their own, for example, Nick Hurd, who's the Minister for Civil Society, has got his own account that he uses for party political matters and for his constituency matters and personal matters, and then another one he uses for the ministerial account. So he's got two. So there's no kind of one answer, and we don't have a set approach for that. But I think the main thing to do is, is the civil service code being followed at all times? I.e., myself as a civil servant and others are not allowed to give undue prominence to for any party political reason. And as long as we abide by those rules, then I think we're doing it the right way. Any more? Got one more last one? One more last one, go on. Second question. The mic's gone. Back there on the right.
Hi. So second question, sorry. There was a presentation yesterday that was showing how many security breaches there have been on social media. I think they were specifically looking at Twitter.
Yeah.
And it had been, I think, 3 major breaches in 2012 and then dozens or tens of breaches last year. As you use social media, and these are third-party platforms, effectively, like Twitter and Pinterest, etc., are you more and more not concerned, but how do you handle the danger or the threat of a security breach, as AP had, where there was a tweet that went out apparently from AP saying that the White House had been hit and Obama injured?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, we've got to be careful of the risks surrounding of using it. But again, as I said earlier, we'd be careful about the risks of not doing it. But we need, if the processes are in place, then then I think we can do all the best we can. Obviously, password protection. And there are different kinds of breach. There's obviously a kind of breach in terms of having a technical hack or something like that, where someone somehow manages to get access to your account and starts tweeting away on behalf of it, usually by guessing someone's password. There's there's obviously just mistakes that people make. People are human. They realise it, and I think a lot of it is know that something. So you can have best practice, for example, which we encourage people to do. For example, don't have your personal and your corporate accounts on your same mobile phone, because then you're easy to tweet from the wrong one. So lots of things happen like that. There are lots of sort of social media cock-ups, not things that are necessarily breaches in terms of giving away secrets or anything like that. But it's something we need. I think every organisation needs to have processes in place to ensure that you balance between the agility of being able to tweet and to use social media when you need to, and also making sure that they do it in the right way. Great. Right, I'm out of time. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for giving up your time this morning. Enjoy the show.